being who we are, being Southerners, it's important, number one, for us to be welcoming. For us to welcome in people with a smile, a handshake. Please sign our guest register. Tell us a little about you and where you're from. And that's really all that they need. History is something that you pick up, you learn. But more importantly, we are there to help serve the public. Mm-hmm. And we're very grateful. I want to give a shout out to all those who support us, or we couldn't keep our doors open.
Each day at Wesley Meadows is a new opportunity to serve older adults and reimagine retirement living. It is the heart of their mission that inspires their team to provide the kind of fun atmosphere and care residents would want for themselves. Experience the warm spirit and faith-based difference of Wesley Meadows. Call 662-429-2070 and schedule your visit today. Hello and welcome to The Real Hernando podcast, presented to you by Wesley Meadows Retirement Community and SRP Studios, a digital content production agency. This podcast spotlights Hernando's organizations, community leaders, and ministries by sharing their stories and what led them to serve the community. The Real Hernando is currently seeking new business sponsors to partner with, which will support the growth of this platform, and in doing so, will create a brighter spotlight for the Hernando community as a whole. To learn more about becoming a sponsor, click the How to Sponsor link in the description. And you can follow The Real Hernando at therealhernando.com and find all the channels there. I am your host, Derek. And today, my guest is Robert Long from the DeSoto County Museum. You are the curator for the DeSoto County Museum. And a little information on the museum. It features artifacts from 1541 to the present. The museum preserves DeSoto's history by recording its past and collecting artifacts and photographs. It is located at 111 East Commerce Street, Hernando. For more information, please visit DeSotoMuseum.org. Robert, thank you for being here today. It's so nice to meet you.
It's great being here, Derek. Thank you. This is a chance to kind of help tell our story and get our message out.
That's what this is all about. And off camera, we were talking about how you've been on my list for a while. I've driven by the museum countless times on Commerce. Finally made it happen, reached out to you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Absolutely.
We're here to talk about your role, but also really let's talk about the museum too, and what it offers and what it shows, and some of the ways it archives. And I looked on your website, and you have cool storyline here. But first, let's talk about Robert. So where are you from originally?
Yeah, I'm a native of Jackson, Mississippi. Grew up in the small town of Madison. Once small town. It's a growing little metropolis suburb of its own now.
Madison,
Mississippi. That's right, in the central part of the state.
Okay.
A little suburb of Jackson. Traveled, been in different places. I was in the newspaper industry for 36 years. So wherever that road took me, journalistically speaking, enjoyed all of those little stints. I was in the Manchester, Tennessee area, up near Nashville for a number of years. Have been here a little shy of a quarter century.
You live in Hernando?
In the Hernando area, about 23 years. We live in Nesbitt. My family and I live in Nesbitt. Moved to Hernando originally. But where we live now, we're kind of on the cusp of Olive Branch, South Haven, Hernando. We're kind of geopolitically kind of center, which helps us because we are very blessed with funding from all of the entities, in the area for the museum. But this is great. This is wonderful for us to be here and tell our story.
Yeah, DeSoto County as a whole really backs itself up. High school football is a different story.
Right.
But as a whole, everyone's proud to be DeSoto.
Well, high school football. Robert Carter. I've sat in the press box with Robert, and it's really neat. I know you all kind of partnered on getting this.
Yes, sir.
Getting this podcast out. Great stories, some of which we can share. What's in the press box stays in the press box, so to speak. But what a great personality, and just a great guy. And so when I was reading up on your formation, I said, well, yeah, certainly Robert would be involved in that because he's a guy who's really cares about the community and involved in the community. He's
amazing. So. I've told the story here a couple times, but within 45 minutes of meeting him at the bank, changing my bank accounts, he gave me the Real Hernando page to build a network around. 45 minutes.
That's great.
But it's so easy to connect with Robert, and then it's reciprocated, and he's just a great guy. But this is about you today.
Okay,
Robert.
well,
another Robert.
I'm not used to talking about myself, but thank you.
Sure. And quickly, you also mentioned that I didn't see in your bio, you're also a pastor. So tell us a little more about that.
Yes, absolutely. I am pastor of New Bethlehem Presbyterian Church, small little church out near Bonne Terre at Church Road and Horn Lake Road in that area.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Actually come from a long line of pastors. 200 years ago, one of my ancestors was a missionary to the Choctaw Indians. And so my grandfather, Robert Long Sr., was pastor of Como United Methodist Church in Como, Mississippi. And I have pretty much been a working journalist for 37 years. Decided I really wanted to serve in another way, in a higher way. And that's when I did answer the call, and still going to seminary. I'm working a couple of jobs, and from the church standpoint and from the museum standpoint. Have a daughter in college, so need I say more?
You're a busy man.
You have to be busy and all of that. But yes, I love that aspect of my life as well. It's very rewarding, and it's just great. Ever since I came to DeSoto County, doors have opened for me. I'm very grateful to those who have opened doors to me. Tom Pittman, who is the CEO of the Community Foundation of Northwest Mississippi, or the past CEO, very instrumental in my career and brought me here. And I've never looked back. I've loved every minute of it.
Awesome. So let's tap into the museum now and your role. What does it mean to be the curator? Let's talk about that, and then let's get into the history of the museum.
Yeah,
here.
a good question. Being a curator is just that. You curate, meaning you preserve artifacts that are in danger of being lost. A case in point, we had a physician's bag that was unraveling. It was, I believe, the bag dated to 1894, and a good friend was in the home where the doctor and his wife lived and felt back in a kind of a crawl space and pulled out this doctor's bag. So I kind of curated what I call or consulted my curator's Bible, which is a big book, tells you how to preserve things. And we soaked it in lanolin for about 3 days, cured it, if you will, and it preserved it. It stopped the leather from unraveling. So, and that's typical of what we do. People bring us items that are either faded newspapers, faded photographs. We search out experts who can enhance those photographs to preserve them, put them in our collection. We usually give the originals back to the families. But the thing I love the most about my job is we're able to plug in all the newcomers that we have here, all the people that moved to our area. They wonder, well, what was here, before I got here? And so they're able to come to the museum and see all of those individuals who really made this county the fascinating, growing, dynamic place, that it is.
Fastest growing.
It is. And as a journalist, I saw a lot of that, and now I get to kind of delve into, well, why is it growing so fast? Who are the people here? Mm-hmm. And that's what's really a cool aspect to me, to be able to do that. And so we preserve a lot of people's artifacts, but more importantly, their stories. Because, in the final analysis, Derek, things that we have at the museum are inarticulate unless they point us to a story. They're a touchstone to a story. And that's what's really valuable, is preserving those stories. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's an honor for me, having lived here these years, to really preserve for future generations the local history around here.
That's fascinating. And you're right. It's the story. It's awesome looking at an artifact. I mean, it's just looking at a physician's bag that's 150 years old.
Sure, yeah.
That's fascinating. But who's the person that used it? Right, you know,
Right,
and
sure.
that's
Sure.
and that's why I tie into all this. You know, we're highlighting the museum, but who's the person behind the museum?
Sure.
You know, so
Well, and thank you. And Dr. Angus Emerson was the physician who delivered many babies back in the day in a horse and buggy. And then Whitley Emerson, his son, in kind, delivered another whole generation. And then Dr. Henry Wadsworth, we have his medical collection as well. But at the museum, we have not only medical history, we have agricultural history, we have the educational history of our area. We've always been very progressive in that we put money towards teachers. And even though the schoolhouse might lack some certain amenities back in the 1920s and the 1930s, it's amazing to me they really try to recruit the best and the brightest to bring them here. So I'm just amazed all the time at the efforts that were made to help this county grow like it has.
It's important, isn't it? It's important to keep that history, otherwise you'll forget about it.
That's right.
You know, and
That's right.
I don't know the actual term, but knowing history can help your future, right?
Oh, absolutely. Everything we know, it doesn't have to just be history itself, but the history of engineering, the history of science. Everything is predicated or built upon what we learned in the past. Mm-hmm. And that's the case here. And we continue to benefit from all those who've come before.
So now let's move to the actual museum, if you don't mind. Sure. So I went on your website and took some notes, and by all means, fill the gaps. And if you want to go further back than this, but we got 1984 DeSoto County citizens formed the historic DeSoto Foundation, and then that looks like it tied in later in '98 to some events that really were critical.
That's right.
There was a historic home torn down.
Right.
And then you guys were like, wait a minute. Or, they were like, oh, man, we don't want more of that. And then you eventually purchased the First Presbyterian Church next door to the museum.
That's right.
Correct? In
That's
1970. Right. So let's extrapolate off that. Whatever I missed, if it needs to go further back, feel free. So.
Sure. Well, we go back to the early origins of our region. A lot of people are amazed to find out that we were completely submerged underneath a warm, shallow sea, which is probably anywhere from 800 to 1,000 feet.
Really?
Which I guess is shallow by certain some standards. But yes, we were completely underwater, and that is why you will not see the Tyrannosaurus rex or the T-Rex among the fossils. You will see like the Spinosauruses, the Mosasauruses, those water-dwelling creatures, and you'll find prehistoric whale bones out walking in the woods. We have people that bring us like, what in the world is a whale bone doing here? Well, 70 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period, we were completely inundated underwater, all the way from the Mississippi Gulf Coast, really all the way up to modern-day Kentucky. So all of the American South pretty much was underneath water for millions of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's, when you look at the deltas, it's so flat, it's easy to think this could have been the base of an ocean, the base of a sea.
Well, you do. You find things, and of course we were as well here in our area, even though we get into the hills around here. But yes, it's amazing what all was here before. And the most interesting thing to me is when children and others come through, we're able to hand them and say, you can hold in your hands something that's 70 million years old. Yeah. It's like, wow. And so that's something that's really neat. And then we're able to kind of bring everyone up to about 10,000 years ago when we had creatures like the woolly mammoth, the mastodon here. We've got a mastodon tooth that I personally discovered just looking for really Civil War artifacts and stumbled upon this 10 to 12,000 year old mastodon tooth. So you never know what you're going to find out there.
That's wild. So, when I started in 1984 and I said go a little back if you needed to, I didn't expect 70 million years.
Yeah, man, we go all the way back. That's right, yeah.
So, but the actual physical address or the building of the museum, how I just gave a little bit of information on how that started, but I would love to hear you.
Exactly, Derek. It was the fellowship hall of the old First Presbyterian Church that was built in 1878 during the American Reconstruction era. And the church served its congregation for many, many years. And then after the determination was made to build a museum, they did extensive renovation inside and out. And they were able to fashion it in a way that we we can hold artifacts, let's say as tall as we have a 23-foot boat that was used in the Walls area. A fishing boat, a recreation boat. It was a commercial fishing vessel. And we're able to display that, and that's really neat. And then we're able to display the outboard that wasn't attached. And people will ask natural questions, why isn't the outboard detached or attached? And it's because during World War II, all the gasoline was being reserved for the planes and the tanks fighting overseas in World War II. So gasoline was rationed, and you could maybe put your outboard on your boat maybe once a month.
Yeah.
But you had to kind of dry dock it for a while and row, kind of the old-fashioned way. And so it leads into, again, storytelling of the sacrifices that people in this country made during the Second World War. And then our blues exhibits, we all know that Mississippi gave birth to the blues. And we have a lot of very formative blues musicians where you can actually punch a button on a kiosk and you can hear the voice of Memphis Minnie or Gus Cannon or Mississippi Joe Kellicott.
That's fascinating.
It really is. And we do have people, especially from Europe, who are just amazed that we have done all this preservation for these ancient voices that really are obscure to some people, but they know exactly who they are because they've taken the time to study the origins of early roots music.
And they were on the cusp of even being able to record it.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
that now we're talking the history of
recording.
Music production.
Sure. Yeah, production. Yeah, it's whereas it was maybe sung in the fields as a field holler early on, or a song. Progressed from there into the juke joints, the honky tonks. And then someone said, come on into the studio and sit down and record. And Lomax, of course, Alan Lomax took his reel-to-reel recorders and recorded Leadbelly out in the cotton fields and went into the prisons. And we're really able to do a great job in preserving that early music. And so the Library of Congress has a lot of those, but in your local museum, you can hear, some of the very formative early pioneers of blues music. Jim Jackson, we recently dedicated a marker in his honor at the cemetery, and he died way back in 1933. But he is one of the early rappers. It's amazing. I know Run DMC gets credit for being one of the early rap groups, but this guy was doing it back in 1933. And just had a great ear for. He talks all the way through his records, so it's really fascinating and neat to see that, and we're able to kind of share it with the community.
Do you have any artifacts in like old? What were they called? With the horn? What were those called?
Well, the gramophone,
yes.
and all this. We actually have several old radios that date really far back. We do have a horn, but it's a shofar. It's another subject. A shofar is a ram's horn that is one of the artifacts in our Jewish History Museum. A lot of people are amazed to learn that we have a Jewish history exhibit there in conjunction with the Holocaust exhibit that we have hosted. It's actually an exhibit created by the Unknown Child Foundation. And people will say, well, why do you have a Jewish history museum or exhibit and a Holocaust exhibit? And my answer is multifaceted in that we had people from our county, young teenagers, basically 18, 19, who swung open those wooden gates, liberated the death camps, saw the bodies stacked high, the children still alive, they offered their canteens to them. Then that gave birth to an idea by some of our school teachers to honor the 1.5 million children who were murdered during the Holocaust. And our kids, and it took them 3.5 years, but they collected 1.5 million pennies, one for each of the children who lost their lives. So, Derek, what's really cool is not only do you get to see local artifacts, but you get to see things like this shofar. You get to see a 2,000-year-old oil lamp that was used in the Dead Sea Caves that is on loan to us from an architect who went to the Holy Land and brought it back. You get to see a lot of things you wouldn't expect to see in a local museum, but really we're beyond local. We're regional, we're international. Globally, we get people from India, from Peru, from Argentina. It's really great, though, when you have people, just like you said, gosh, I've driven by this museum a million times and never come in. And that really warms my heart that we get those people, because we've really revamped and added to the exhibits that we've have inside the museum over the years. Mm-hmm. But to get people from all over the world and just down the street as well is just a wonderful thing. So we have those exhibits. We have in our Civil War room, we have stories, photographs of escaped African-American slaves who fought for their freedom, along with local Confederates who, from the privates to the generals, you name it. We have artifacts that were uncovered that were in yards and in the back 40 perhaps, and dug up and brought in. All of that together, collectively, inclusively, tells our story. And all the more voices that we can get in to help telling that story, the better. Mm-hmm. And so we have, almost like an open mic night. And we haven't had one of these since COVID, but we're about to start our nights at the museum again, where people come in and they tell stories. They tell stories of who was here, who did this, who did that. We've had good attendance in the past. We have art shows, art exhibits. We try to have something for everyone. And up until recently, fairly recently, we had bluegrass every Thursday evening. Mr. Roy Metter, we lost him. He was a great bluegrass picker. And we're looking for some of the younger ones to help step in now and rekindle that great tradition that we had of the bluegrass pickers coming in and playing. But we want it to be a hub of activity. We want to have things going all the time. This is our 20th year. So we're really excited to kind of get the message out that we're 20 years and growing.
5M Services, your comfort specialists. We offer heating, ventilating, and air conditioning service. Call us for any of your HVAC needs. 662-560-7331. We are here for you 24/7.
Team Couch of Birch Realty Group is a full-service team of realtors specializing in real estate sales. With over 900 transactions alone in the past 5 years, their experience is your best asset. Go to teamcouch.com or call 662-449-1700.
Gustafson Properties. Gustafson Properties has been building beautiful custom homes in DeSoto County and surrounding areas for over 20 years. Are you ready to build your new custom home? Call us today at 662-449-6271.
It's when you mentioned it's regional, local, regional. Yeah, I mean, you're exhibiting things from all over the world,
That's right.
And stories and moments of history from all over the world. And yeah, something like the Holocaust, slavery, the Civil War. A lot of this stuff can be polarizing and sensitive, but it's still important. It was part of our history. It
Absolutely.
just is what it is, regardless of how bad it was.
Sure.
And children or youth can educate themselves on that.
That's right.
And it's good to know your history.
Sure it is.
As bad as it may have been in some areas,
Right.
So how does it work as far as going to visit the museum? Is it an appointment?
Not at all. No, we're open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 10 until 5.
And it's just free? You just show
It is free.
Yeah.
We do have a little donation box out there. We have a large museum. It's kind of deceiving from the street. It looks like it might be small, but the entire museum, the collection, we've got more than 24 exhibits. We have innumerable collections beyond that in our new archive room. Before, we really never had a place. I've only been the curator there now for going in about 5.5 years. And what I noticed is, because as a journalist, I wanted to do research, and people need a place to do research. So we turned a storage room into a research room. And I mentioned Mr. Pittman before. Tom was very generous to us when I left the newspaper. He gave us all that they had of all the bound volumes of all the newspaper articles. So routinely, I get questions from people wanting obituaries of maybe grandpa or grandma or some relative or great-grandfather. We get to all of that as we can. I do have an intern now that's assisting me, that's helping, but it's kind of on a first-come, first-served basis. But we help people. Mm-hmm. We help people who want to connect to the past. Maybe part of their family story is missing, and they want to help complete that. And for me, that is just it's a neat thing for me to see when you can give somebody maybe the missing pieces of their family story that they don't know about. So we help many people who have really no idea who their ancestors were. There are places online that you can do that, but a lot of times people who maybe are older can't navigate all of that. So we help them get started. We do what we can to kind of get them started and kind of help them fill in the pieces.
Yeah, I would gather anything paper related must take some real restoration, preservation, right?
Sure.
What does that look like? How
Right.
how old? How far back do your museum or any museums have of paper related? Like,
Well, the DeSoto County Courthouse, and I credit the longtime circuit clerk, or excuse me, Chancery clerk Sluggo Davis in doing this. But they set aside a room at the county courthouse that is limited access. You have to sign in and out. They have newspaper copies going back to 1866, 1 year after the American Civil War, that are in really remarkably good condition. Now, our collection goes back. We do have newspaper bounds dating back from the 1870s, but they're primarily 20th century of that era, and they go all the way up until the recent years. So we get asked quite frequently, "Can you help us?" And we do. We never turn any requests down. We try to help people. People are very patient. They know that we have limited staff, so we can't just get to everyone's query immediately, but we do try to help them as much as we can. I got started as a teenager helping out at the Mississippi Department of Archives and History in Jackson, just as a volunteer, kind of helping shelve this and shelve that. Always loved history. And then my Sunday school teacher he's still with us. He's about 90. He's Elbert Hilliard. He was a longtime state director for Archives and History. So early on in my life, I just had this love for history, for stories. I took the journalism route, but then after about 36 years, now I'm on the history route of the next chapter.
You're not reporting the present.
No, I mean, well, it's all history. I mean, the present is, of course, history as well, but I'm leaving that to others right now. Everything yesterday is just as relevant as something 100 years ago. I know during COVID, and my daughter got tired of me saying this, but I reminded her, I said, "You're living history right now through this COVID epidemic." And
True.
She's like, "Yeah, Dad, but I'd rather not, you know." And
None of us wanted to.
None of us wanted to, and we do. We're going to be among some of the first museums in the nation to have a COVID exhibit, but folks are they're really sick of it right now. But what we did, Derek, which is really neat, we saved almost from the beginning, the early days of the epidemic, all the newspaper articles talking about the epidemic. I know I went out personally and took photographs, closed due to COVID epidemic, even from bulletin boards and supermarkets. Anything that relates to a historic period, and that is a historic period.
And it will be for centuries,
Absolutely.
generations.
Absolutely. So we tried to kind of to get a slice of life during this very challenging time in the world's history, and we'll unveil it. We hope to have luminaries that pay tribute to those who died of COVID in DeSoto County and the surrounding area. But that's for another day. Right now, we're rebuilding. You know, there was a time during the height of COVID, all museums in Mississippi had to shut down for a time. And we had to come up with a plan for the public safety, and we cordoned off an area right inside the museum with plexiglass. I had to take everyone's temperature. These were safety protocols that we had to take. And if anyone had a temperature, I would take them on a tour outside the museum and spend time with them. It was challenging for us, and not just us. And some museums have closed, and we managed to persevere through a lot of hard work and prayers. We were able to hang on, and like I said, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary. But it was a challenging time, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. And COVID, timeline-wise, for me, when I have to think of dates and when did I do this and when did I do that, it's pre or post?
Sure, absolutely.
And if I know it happened before COVID, then I know it's before 2020. And, and that's just going to be solidified for forever. And,
yeah, it will.
And you guys get to now, in the air quote present time, start preserving this now rather than trying to do it 50 years from now.
Absolutely. We started immediately. And actually, we had a brand new exhibit coming online just about the time that COVID started. And we included on the sign, it says from cholera to coronavirus. And this was like literally the first week. We just coincidentally happened to be putting together this medical exhibit. And sadly, we've lost a lot of townspeople due to COVID and others as well. And we get to pay tribute or homage to them in some way by remembering this exhibit, because it was a very scary time. Literally, people who seemed to be in good health were passing away. And this is very similar to what happened during the yellow fever epidemic of 1878. And you can come to the museum and you can actually see the journal where all the names of the deceased who died from yellow fever are in this journal. It was a scary time then. So we've had epidemics before, not to the magnitude of the COVID epidemic as far as the numbers who died. I think it's up around 1.7 or 1.8 million, something like that, over a 3-year period. But let's just say with yellow fever, we lost not just us, but Memphis, Grenada, Holly Springs, this whole area, 20,000 people in 5 weeks.
In 5 weeks?
In 5 weeks, 20,000 dead. So yellow fever is something that would decimate families. Memphis lost so many residents, they lost their charter for a time.
When was this again?
1878, September, October of 18.
Look, relatively speaking, that's not that long ago.
It really isn't. It's amazing, and that's something, Derek, I learn in my line of work every day. It could be yesterday, and they were people just like us. They happened to live a long time ago. The human lifespan isn't as long as some creatures here on Earth, but they encountered all the things that we do, the horror of experiencing an epidemic, the sorrow of losing someone, the uncertainty, the anxiety, all those kinds of things. They felt these same emotions that we felt back, that we feel today. They felt them, experienced them back in the day as well.
And some lack of education on it. There was no internet back then.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm sure there was some people, a little more deeper into the rural areas that just had no idea what was going on. Other than just getting their paper, the newspaper. That's
right. And of course, no one really had any answers for yellow fever. It was caused by the Egypti mosquito, the ankle biter, if you will. They did not realize that until some 30 years after this epidemic during the Spanish-American War. Walter Reed of Walter Reed Army Medical Center fame, he discovered that his troops in Cuba that were bivouacked near the open latrines where mosquitoes were breeding during the war, a lot of his men were dying in that area. He put 2 and 2 together, and they came up with a vaccine for yellow fever and actually better sanitation practices, having better sewage and drainage and not having open latrines and all of that. Really helped to cut down on typhoid and all these diseases that can spring about from really poor hygiene practices. So we've come a long way, and we learn from the past. The most important thing is learning the lessons from the past.
Right. That's why you need to preserve it.
That's my job primarily, is helping share those lessons that we hopefully have learned all those years. Yeah.
It's just I complain about the dumbest things when I hear about the living conditions.
Right. Yeah, we have it made, really, relatively speaking.
Man, the AC is off by a couple degrees.
Yeah, I mean, and even in that, they would have blocks of ice, and then when electricity came along, they'd have fans behind the blocks of ice. And then air conditioners really didn't come into the fore until the 50s. I know my folks were out in Arizona, and my father was in the Air Force, and that's when they experienced the early days of air conditioning. They didn't have it in Mississippi, but it's a dry heat out there, and so but the temperatures get up to 117, 118 degrees in the Arizona desert. So yeah, those early Air Force cadets and their families had air conditioning, and then it spread to the rest of the country. And again, the ideas for exhibits are really limitless. We could do a whole exhibit on air conditioning, HVAC, how you lived, in the sweltering heat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. You're right, how far we've come. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap it up, do you have any programs or need for volunteers?
Absolutely.
So how do people get involved?
Absolutely. It is one of the most rewarding jobs that you could ever have, seriously. Mm-hmm. You meet people from all over the world. We ask people to come to see me at the museum. If I like to meet them in person and see them, and kind of check out their people skills. Being who we are, being Southerners, it's important, number one, for us to be welcoming. For us to welcome in people with a smile, a handshake. Please sign our guest register. Tell us a little about you and where you're from. And that's really all that they need. They can learn from me, and I'll be happy to kind of share with them the tour that I give. But we don't expect our volunteers to immediately, for instance, know about the Cretaceous period and what dinosaurs existed and all of that. That's not.
You get a
necessary.
crash course in a week. They have to know all the history.
No, not at all. History is something that you pick up, you learn. But more importantly, we are there to help serve the public. Mm-hmm. And we're very grateful. I want to give a shout out to all those who support us, or we couldn't keep our doors open.
Do you have sponsors?
Well, the DeSoto County Board of Supervisors, the cities, they contribute to us. We do have monies that we raise through grants on our own, which are vital nowadays. That's kind of the watchword. Grants are to fund a lot of our ambitious projects. A cool thing we're working on, and we're getting there. I'm always thinking of new ideas for the museum, and I pass by this long open hallway that connects one wing of the building to the other wing. And it's almost the exact dimensions of a train car, and I love trains. And so I said, let's have a virtual train car. And so we got 3 televisions on the wall. We're going to sequence visual scenes like from a railroad car on those televisions. We're going to create what we call a fake floor, where it'll have rollers and springs. Will give you the sensation of being on a train. And so when you cue the scenery, and the floor is going to vibrate, and you're going to hear the woo-woo and the clang-clang, I promise you're going to feel like you're on a train. Yeah. And this came out of my imagination, I guess, a couple of years ago when I took an Amtrak train and saw 38 states. I had seen this beautiful country that we have from the air. I'm kind of a white-knuckle flyer, so I kind of peek out the window, right, And but I really didn't get to see this beautiful land that we call America on the ground until I took this train trip across the country. And it's my hope, because I rode a train as a child, I can barely remember it, but I did, that our children will have kind of that romantic trip, if you will, back in time riding on a train. And then the destination from where you enter or leave the main part of the museum to the back is a Thomas the Train room. And all of us know who Thomas the Train is. So when the Memphis Railroad and Trolley Museum closed their doors about a year and a half ago, they gave us a good deal of their artifacts. So we now have a train exhibit on top of the dinosaurs in our Jewish history room, and our unknown child exhibit, and our Civil War room. Our Civil War room, I might add, has as the centerpiece, the crown jewels, the only intact existing shells from the first hour of the first day of the entire American Civil War. We had a gentleman named D.E. Wilson who was there. And he would come here, part of the Wilson family. He would come here and raise his family. But he knew he was witnessing history and paid the railroad freight to ship them here. And we have those, and the Smithsonian and the Citadel has wanted those. It's like we can't, when I say it's intact shells, They're fossilized. We've had our folks look at them, and they're safe. I mean, they're not going to go off, but kind of add some drama to your tour if you're going through.
Live rounds.
You get a little bit of rush as you walk past. But seriously, one of course it's fossilized. It's sat out in the weather for 145 years. On top of this guy's gates to his home out in Lake Cormorant. And the other one has no powder left at all. The other, it's fossilized. It's inert. But it's really neat. So who would have ever guessed that you can go to the local museum and see these shells that this gentleman was able to preserve for us, 160 years ago. We've had them for 20 years. Ever since we opened our doors, we've had these artillery shells. And then we've got, I think, one of the finest musket collections of British Enfields that were smuggled to the American South during the war, Springfield muskets as well. We've got a number of things that any Civil War collector or enthusiast would love to have. Man. So you're so gracious with your time. I could spend all day talking to you, Derek, about all we have down there. It's fantastic.
Anyone listening that's not like running out their house to go to this place, I know. Sadly, now that I think about it, it's like, man, I should have gone before this interview.
No, it's okay. Hopefully, we visually kind of give you an idea.
But I'm fascinated. I need to go there now.
You are welcome. We'll roll out the red carpet for you, and we give a personal tour. That's something that we try to do. Everyone kind of needs perspective as to what they're looking at instead of just turning people loose. Mm-hmm. And so we do that, and it's a way for us to interact with people. And I love that. I'm a people person, so I love that, especially being able to interact with people.
And especially, there's a lot of history buffs out there like yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Really will go there to want to learn new things.
That's right.
They're going there with purpose.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Well, fascinating stuff, Robert. Thanks for doing this. Again, if anyone's interested in volunteering or just getting involved, to go to DeSotoMuseum.org. Is that correct?
DeSotoMuseum.org is our website. We're on Facebook as well. Hopefully listeners of your podcast will, again, come down and see us. We're open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 10 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. The tour takes about 45 minutes, so you want to come about 3:45. If you come at 5, we have to close. Yeah, my wife is usually saying, I'm making dinner, so where are you and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I have been known to stay until every single person has been seen. And that's only to say that we feel like if they took the time to come see us, that we need to take the time, to serve their needs. So.
Yeah, they went there to see some cool history.
That's right.
So let's give it to them. Right?
That's right.
Yeah, and 111 East Commerce Street, right there in the middle of Commerce. So one of these days, I'm not going to just drive by it.
No, come in. Yeah, come in, absolutely. And we welcome everyone. And I just want to say, certainly wish your podcast well.
Thank you.
This is a great conduit for the community. People, for them to know what's going on in their community. So any advertisers out there, advertise on Derek's podcast. Maybe drop a little something in the jar for us too. It's all good. It'll come back to you in many, many ways. But Derek, again, thank you for having us.
Absolutely, and you're right. And I'm going to be thanking my sponsors here in the outro. But you're right, and I've used that word, conduit. Any sponsor or advertiser that supports this is directly supporting the community.
Absolutely.
Point proven here as you sit across from me. Right. So I appreciate your kind words on that. And that is the mission of this podcast, spotlight Hernando, because I love Hernando. And Hernando's a special place.
It is, indeed.
All right. So before I say bye to you, let's go to the audience here. And thank you for hanging out. If you've made it to this end, congratulations,
Absolutely.
But yes, to my sponsors, again, I want to shout out to them and spotlight them because they do absolutely help power this mission here. We got Wesley Meadows Retirement Community, Gustafson Properties, 5M Services, Team Couch of Birch Realty, Wild Cultures Sourdough, the DeSoto Arts Council. When a nonprofit sponsors
great folks.
When a nonprofit sponsors a profit, for-profit. That says a lot. Brandon Vanderberg from Shelter Insurance and my friends at Boba Cream. I'm proud that they're all Hernando-based. It's really special. But, I can always add more and, to help grow this even more. As more sponsors come in, the brighter the spotlight gets. It's like fuel, right? And if you want more information on go to the description. You'll see the forum link in there. The forum link is just there to give me contact so I can follow up, not agreeing to anything. And everything is at therealhernando.com. That's where all of our channels access. We are on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're everywhere, man. Like, we just try to spread it out there.
There you go.
And as always, and then again, thank you for being here, Robert. Appreciate our time here.
Yes, sir.
And for those watching and listening, thank you and have a great day.